Hi everyone and welcome to Mission Across Borders, the podcast where we explore the life, challenges and international students worldwide. I'm your host Savitran Eshwar, Chief of Podcast to the Council of English Division Students of Poland. And today we are diving into a crucial topic, mental health challenges faced by international students. We will be discussing the academic struggles, personality-driven challenges, peer pressure and common mental health conditions. Alongside this, we'll explore how friends and loved ones can notice signs of mental distress and support for those in need. Today's episode is packed with insights and real life scenarios. We have a very special guest, Dr. Muskan Sharma, who is a MD graduate from Europe and also is pursuing specialty training in psychiatry. Please introduce yourself, Dr. Muskan.
And hi everyone who's watching right now. As Savitran very beautifully introduced myself, thanks for that. I am Dr. Muskan Sharma. I'm a medical graduate and I have a very keen interest in the field of psychiatry. So I'm hoping we have a lovely chat today and we can discuss some very important points, especially with a focus on mental health.
Looking forward to the tips which you can give and for the awareness which can be created in terms of the academic struggles students have and the kind of mental health and mental distress that they face. With that, I would like to begin that students usually have an intense academic pressure, especially when they're abroad, as there isn't their family next to them, their friend circle, or the kind of social security. And it takes a time for everyone to really get a group or a people which can who can comfort them. So, how do you think this pressure impacts their mental health?
All right. So, because I've gone through this firsthand, let me just start off with something which is very obvious to the entire medical fraternity right now. I think just as a medical student, the journey itself is very overwhelming. It's very rigorous. You have to work day in, day out. And when you club it with sort of leaving the comfort of your home and you go abroad, it's just added pressure. It's pressure to live up to the expectations of your parents back home, of your friends back home. Some people, they don't have that much of a financial advantage as compared to the rest of the population. So there are a lot of sacrifices, a lot of adjustments, a lot of compromises involved when you move abroad to pursue higher education. And this plays a massive, massive role in affecting someone's mental health. Initially, when you step abroad, you're just stepping foot into a completely foreign land. There are numerous issues you have to deal with. You have to look into settling down there. There might be a culture shock. There might be, some people are not that good at finding new friends. So you're still sort of trying to build your own little world, leaving the comfort of something that you had built for so many years. Some people stay in the same place for their schooling or maybe for other reasons. They're not used to moving around. So change is always difficult. And I think this is something that plays a major role and takes a massive toll on the mental health of students who have to sort of move abroad. And especially as I mentioned in the medical field, it's just added pressure. It's tough anywhere you've made the road.
And also the fact that academic pressure for medical students is one of the longest lasting pressures because of the duration of the course in itself being one of the longest pathways. How about students when it comes to exams? It's an added on pressure. One thing is academic pressure throughout the year, and one is the pressure that builds upon a particular student during the examination phase. So often I've seen this that students who are abroad, when they fail an exam or when they have to repeat a year or a semester in medical school, what kind of mental toll does this take on students and how can one cope with all the added pressures and the anxiety of facing the other classmates and students?
Absolutely. I think, Savitran, you touched on a very important topic. So, a lot of people tend not to acknowledge that when you fail an exam, sometimes it kind of feels like the end of the world. It's very tough to accept failures, especially, as I said, away from home, because it is a feeling of isolation. You get isolated from your peers, people you might have made friends with, people you might have grown close to, are now moving a step forward, but you're still stuck where you right were. But let me just reframe it a little. I think failure is a myth. Nothing is failure in life. It's experience. It's experience and it's lesson. But at the same time, it's easier said than done. Let me share a personal anecdote with you actually. So I recently cleared the FMG exam. All right. Right before the FMG exam, I will not name which exam, but I wrote a very important exam that should have sort of contributed a lot to my medical journey. I failed it. I failed by a very few margin and I struggled to talk to my friends about it. I didn't even bring it up. My friends sort of just assumed that she didn't bring it up. Okay, she's failed it. Let us not ask her. And then that acted as a massive, motivation for me to sort of get back into the zone, get myself out of that zone of I'm not enough, I can't do it. And I was disciplined for FMG. So how I saw that was not in the initially, yes, I kept thinking that, oh my God, I failed an exam. This is not where I was supposed to be. This is supposed to look very nice on my CV. None of that happened. But the thing that came after it, the discipline and the motivation it taught me actually made me conquer something way bigger, which was the FMG exam, and which is going to sort of be my stepping stone into the journey of being a doctor in India right now. So coming back to the same point, when I was going for this exam, the one that I failed, one of my closest friends texted me something, and I think everyone should sort of abide by this philosophy in life. He asked me, how easily do you move on from a question that you think you might have gotten wrong? Does that affect all the other questions that you sort of attempt in the exam? Or do you just get stuck on that question and then you're like, oh my God, this is it, I failed it? That's how you should see life, and that's how you should see failure in life. If you failed one thing, it doesn't mean you failed in life. It just means that it's getting you ready for something bigger. So it's very, very tough to sort of, acknowledge that change in perspective. But once you do it, you're unstoppable. Now, as medical students abroad, you have to sort of get back up. You have to take it as a learning lesson. You have to follow a good routine. You have to make yourself disciplined. And the most important, reach out to people. If there is your friends who are supportive, if there is your family that is supportive, talk to them. Ask them, what do you think I could have done better so that this doesn't repeat? You cannot change the fact now. And we all must learn how to accept failure. It's part of life. You don't become successful if you haven't seen your fair share of failure. So that's what I like to say about.
I think that's a great idea and a great perspective, very positive way of looking into such situations, because these are challenges in life, and I think everyone has to at some point face these. But it's a very very wonderful the way you look into it, and the positive mindset and taking it to your advantage, making it that as your strength and working hard for the upcoming challenge and moving ahead is something I think everyone should work on it. It's not something which comes in a day, of course, but working on making your sadness, your failure into your strength. I think that should be the goal for one.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What do you think about universities now? We just spoke about what can one do at an individual level, which is as students we should have a positive attitude or mindset and looking things, finding the little positive in the most negative of situation or a bad day. That is one doing as an individual at an individual level. But as a university, do you think that your college or your university can play a role in supporting the student or the students who are academically struggling?
All right. Okay, here's my 2 cents on it. So I think back in the day, when I say back in the day, I'm not that old. I just mean a couple of years ago. There was not a lot of, conversations surrounding mental health. So schools, universities, all academic institutions were very rigid about the fact that if you excel academically, you're doing a good job. But mostly it would neglect the fact that a lot of students did excel academically, but at the expense of their own mental. I think now, especially our current generation, has really turned the narrative. Mental health, the talks are booming right now. Most of the people you go up on LinkedIn, a lot of them have mental health advocates in their bios. And it's lovely to see that, it's
Yes.
great. I have it myself. So it's lovely to see that people are talking about this more. Similarly, yeah, go on.
Unlike before that mental health was neglected, it was more the physical health that was concentrated upon. I think today even mental health is taken seriously, unlike
Yeah.
before. Looked upon as a taboo, and now it's a pretty different perspective in which people look into.
Yes. Absolutely. So similarly, I feel like in universities as well. So my university, I was lucky enough that most of my professors, most of the faculty, they're very friendly. They were very welcoming. So at any point of time, if I felt like I need someone who's either, senior to me or is an adult, I'm also an adult, but at that point of time, I still wasn't. there's an adult that I want to reach out to. They welcomed me with open arms. I could always walk up to them and I could always just share little anecdotes of my daily life. What is affecting me? How can I, sort of work on things that are taking a toll on my health or on my mental health for that matter? But that is not enough. Yes, that is good at a personal level. I think what has really started to happen now in certain universities and institutions, and I think the others should also adapt to it, is having on board psychologists or counselors who the students can reach to in professional capacity. There are certain things, there are certain issues that you cannot just resolve with sheer talking. You need professional help. And every institution, I think, should make it mandatory to have these professionals on board in house so that at any point of time, if a student is suffering from something that they need professional assistance for in terms of mental health, it should be given equal importance. I think that is really, really important. So, that is one thing I would like to definitely say that universities should start incorporating. Another thing that I think I can touch base on is that there could also be an increase in surge of workshops, seminars, talks. Again, increase the conversations, increase the frequency of conversations you have around these topics. So encourage more talks, encourage students to be speakers for these talks, get them to share their life experiences, get them to talk to the audience. They will connect with these people and you form your own little network. And it makes things much easier.
For sure, I completely agree to what you said. Surely, the mental health also reflects on the academic performances of students because once the mental health, the issue underlying the root cause is addressed, then it also reflects on the efficiency of a student and the academic progress as well. So, as
Absolutely.
you just mentioned, that more students should come up and speak. I think we have Pura, who's a third year medical student from Georgia, pursuing MD, here to share her experiences, her challenges as well. So we'll just hear out to her and get back to our questions as well. So Apurva, we were talking about the academic struggles of medical students and what are the usual intense pressures situation one as a medical student can face, which could be a situation where a student fails an exam or repeating a year in the med school. So what do you think about this kind of a situation? How would you look into it? Or if you have any experience to share with us, please go ahead.
Definitely. I feel like there are a lot of factors that come into this. First of all, I'll just start that I'll say growing up, this is something I'll share as a personal experience that I know a lot of people can relate to. Growing up, I did not have that much of a friend group to rely on, and that is a reality for a lot of people. So, and as international students, when you're put out into the world like that, you are expected to adapt to a whole new way of teaching, among other things, obviously, and you're expected to find your people or find like a family or a home in a group of people that you've never met before, and that can get very overwhelming. So when I first went to university, the first people I would look out for were my classmates, my anyone who seemed approachable and welcoming at that point. Now, I happened to stay in a hostel in my first year, and which gave me a chance to connect with a lot of my peers firsthand. It was not just my batchmates, but also my seniors, and that actually helped me a lot. It was not only on the emotional side of it, but practically speaking, having people from different age groups and different batches, it really helps the way you perceive things. So even from the most simplest things to the most serious stuff, having students from different age groups and semesters around, it really helps the way you take decisions basically. Now coming to the academic struggle, academic failure, it is the struggle is real. It's something that everyone faces at some point. Anyone is going to face it, and it is not an individual problem. Some like every international student faces it basically, and moreover, it's not a just a problem on its own. It's a multifaceted problem, which means it has a lot of factors affecting it. Now, this can be different according to different people, but something that I feel is an issue mostly it is a lack of proper planning, psychological or personality issues. It can be having a low self efficacy, low self esteem, and this is not going to, get you can't get rid of all of this overnight. Eventually, it will. And the best way to do that is to treat these factors individually. And once you treat them, then the struggles will be eased out, your self esteem and your confidence will boost. And eventually, your mental health is going to get better. You're going to get through it, basically. So, that is something. I think one more important thing is that the best way to do so is to seek help. Now, it seems somewhat people restrict themselves from asking for help, but it is the best and the most important thing that you can do. A very simple example of this, which I'm sure a lot of people will relate to, is when I came first year, I used to hate biochemistry. If I had to boil it down to one subject that I absolutely detested, it was biochemistry. So I used to start to study with that hatred in mind, and obviously I didn't study it at all. Just was failing in the subject. So, and I asked my seniors, like, what should I do about this? And the first thing they told me is to shut the textbook, which seemed absurd to me. How do you not study from a textbook? And they asked me to watch videos of Ninja Nerd on YouTube, which now, as a third year student, seems so obvious. How do you not know Ninja Nerd? But as a first year, you don't know all of these things. So I did watch it. I mean, I did try it, and I ended up actually falling in love with the subject. So that is just highlighting how important it is to seek help.
The problem is not that big enough that we actually thought it of.
Exactly.
Simple solutions to complex issues. Biochemistry, of course, is something which I think I relate personally as well, because it took me a hell of a time in my first year. But as the years passed, it did get usual. All right. So with that, I think I'll be speaking about the next big aspect of mental health, which is personality challenges. For introverted, underconfident students, adapting to new environments can be overwhelming. What unique struggles do they face? Dr. Muskan, please comment on that.
Before I answer your question, I just want to quickly touch base on what Apurva said because I think we can build up to it from this. She mentioned something very important, and that is reaching out to the right people. So, you know how her peers helped her, they guided her that, okay, shut down the textbook, look at videos, make studying enjoyable. Also, I still have a lot of respect for Purva because you like biochemistry, but I till date detest it. I cannot do it for the life of me. But anyway, moving on from that. So, introversion is something that really sort of makes you feel underconfident in a very overstimulating world. So, especially when you're abroad, you might feel like you don't belong. You might feel very isolated. You might feel very, you might have a sense of low self esteem. But so the thing is, the way you work towards building a better cohort, the way you work towards, building more confidence in life, take tiny steps. You don't need to jump into a conference with 1,000 people on stage and give a presentation on your first day. No, you don't. Take tiny steps. Work towards the destination, make new friends, make it a point that maybe when you're attending a new event, maybe when you're going for your lectures, talk to one new person every day. It really helps you build your conversation skills. It really helps you come out of your shell and open up more to people. Another way to do this is, for example, that you can involve yourself more in class discussion. So let's say, for example, let's take biochemistry for that matter. The urea cycle is being discussed in class. Make it a point that if you're confused about a topic, bring it up. Talk to the staff, talk to the faculty, talk to your peers around you, and just try to put yourself out there more. You know, I have always said this that people who are introverted, it doesn't mean you're invisible. It just means that in a new place you can feel that way. And when you find your correct sort of cohort, you find your correct set of friends. Introverted people are the most fun people to hang out with. My best friends are introverted and I'm a massive extrovert. But we get along like two rocks in a boat, if that's even a saying. So yes, find your way, find your voice, take tiny steps, and you will definitely see results. But it's not going to be a one-day battle. You'll have to persevere through it. You'll have to be resilient.
Right, I think that's really motivating word, and for sure, I think I also relate to it. I personally believe, I don't know if this is a real thing in psychology or in like as a personality trait, but I feel once a extroverted person goes to another environment, an uncomfortable place, or in between a new circle, could become introverted for a interim period. And I feel I also was one such person who was very extroverted in my school days, but in the university things are a little different. Yeah, I mean, many a times people don't agree to it with the things I do, but those things are coming from a very different place. It is coming from a very different interest and passion. But when it comes to personal life and when it comes to making friends or talking out and showcasing what you are as a person, I think that's where introversion really affects you. You are somewhere pulled back. Yeah. So on that note, students, there are some students who get easily influenced, who are gullible to the external environment. And why is it important to stay agile and adaptable in an international setting?
All right, okay, let me address this in a way. So, in an international setting, I think adaptability is in fact very key to navigating the different challenges that you have to face in that environment. There are students who might be very easily influenced, and then they can find themselves in situations that might really compromise their core values. It could be anything. It could be in the form of peer pressure. It could be in the form of just, being in certain environments where they don't wish to be, but they're just there because of sheer influence. So before I was moving to Tbilisi, Georgia to pursue my medicine, my mom said something that has really stuck with me till date. So I'm just going to put it out there. She told me that it is going to be important to be gullible and flexible, but in the right way. How you do that is that you always keep in mind adaptability isn't really about changing who you are. It's more about growing who you're meant to be. That's how you see it. So do not forget your core values. It is important to be flexible. You learn new things in life. If you're not open to change, you will never learn. But at the same time, if you get influenced by the wrong things, you might start, backtracking from your main goal in life. And nobody wants that. So it's important to be open. Be open to new experiences. If you've never gone on a trek before, maybe next weekend that's what you should do. But at the same time, if someone tells you that, hey, come out with me for a party when you have an exam at 7 a.m. next morning, please don't compromise your health. You can always go partying the next weekend. So be true to your core values, but at the same time, be open to new ideas.
So I think that is also important in a new setting that you have that kind of a you distinguish between what is your border, like where you set the limit as well. So perfect, that's great. So what are one advice you would give to someone who's struggling to find their voice or assert themselves in a foreign environment?
Hmm. Very, very interesting question. Okay, this is how I did it. And maybe Apurva can relate to this as well, since she's currently in Georgia. So initially, when I went back in first year, there was not a lot of culture of having student clubs or student communities. And I would go to my classes in university, I would study for a fixed period of time, I would come back, I would chill with my roommate, and that was my day. So I don't know if you guys have watched this movie called Tamasha, and there's a Bollywood actor in there called Ranbir Kapoor, and his name is Ved, and he lives a very monotonous life to the point that it results in a complete breakdown. So that is how you start feeling like. You feel like you're living a very robotic life. Then, when I was in my fifth year, so the total duration of the course is 6 years, so I was in my second last year, about to finish university, a couple of my friends came up with this idea that we should start student clubs and we should start having more student community. And the minute that happened, my extroverted self jumped onto the opportunity. And that was a game changer for me. That was a game changer because I found the best of my friends there. Not just friends, but I found the best of my mentors there. Because when you sort of align yourself with people who share the same ideologies as you, who want to do the same things as you in life, you can hold tremendous conversations and you can learn a lot from just listening to them. So, anyone who's trying to sort of make their mark, especially abroad, one major advice I would definitely want to say is get involved. Get involved in these extracurricular activities. Sometimes you might feel like, oh, what if I get too involved and my academic activities start getting affected? You need to find a balance. 70% of your focus should be on your academic, 100% because that's the main goal. But 30% of your holistic development will rely on these extracurricular activities because you'll find a lot of new people. You will learn how to participate in conferences, in different sort of workshops. You will learn a lot of new skills. So that would be my top go-to advice, hands down.
All right, all right. That sounds really workable. 70/30, that's a good ratio. And I think once a student finds the balance, the place where to strike the balance and manage and handle both the things, I think that's the place where things turn, the tables turn, and the ball is in your court. So that's great. And Apurva, do you have anything to add to this? Do you have any experiences to share on this note?
I'll share a very it's a very recent incident of a very close friend of mine. Now I've known this person from for the past 3 years. I've known her since day one, and I know that she's excellent in studying. She's like top grades, everything like the best, you know. And after a point of time, I mean, in second year or so, I felt like I saw her lose her, you know, confidence. She lost focus somehow, and it seemed like, you know, she was like very off track. And something that she herself realized and she did in attempt to reverse this is that she immediately joined clubs, she joined organizations, and she sort of, you know, got so involved and active in all of this, and that sort of seemed to reset her. Now, this is something that I saw that it is a very classic case of burnout, and this is another very real issue. When it happens, this sort of a reset is what you need to get back on track, and the best way to do it is through organizations, through student, run sort of groups, and they have activities, they hold conferences, whatever it is. If it is pertinent to your passion or your area of interest, it's going to sort of reset you. Another thing that these organizations and all of these communities they help in is validation, which is a very important thing. It's very human nature to need that sort of a validation, gratification for what you do. And this being one of the longest bachelor courses, 6 and 7 years is not a joke. And 6 or 7 years without that validation for the amount of effort you put in, it just gets very difficult. So this is where you're going to get that validation to move on and sort of, you know, come out positively from the other side of the course.
Right, I think that's really something I related to as well, because the part where you say that the validation, I feel I look into it as a trigger, like the external environment sometimes triggers you to realize who you actually are or to realize your potential. Sometimes we forget in the process of the challenges and the exams, and as Dr. Muskan mentioned, the monotonous life, which eventually at some point happens without realizing. You don't realize that you're getting into something vicious cycle, but you do get into it. And then you are worried about failure, you're worried about your efficiency going down. But I think it's very important to realize that like when we associate ourselves and go out in the external environment, there might be triggers that might help us rediscover our own potential, and it's more like an insight into ourselves. So that's something really great. And with that, I think we would move on to the next topic, which I would like to emphasize on, which is peer pressure. And that's a challenge for many students, but it's amplified when studying abroad, as students are alone, they are away from their family, and for many students, their family is their support system, their backbone, and everyone loves their family, everyone wants to be with their loved ones. But Dr. Muskan, why do you think this this is a case where students are heavily affected by peer pressure and supposedly the wrong environment or wrong people coming in at the most vulnerable time?
I think, Savitran, you mentioned some very important points whilst you were asking me that question. So, yeah, you're in an environment where you're very vulnerable. You have, as humans, we have this, crave to have a sense of belongingness. We want to fit in. So, when you leave the comfort of your home, all these feelings of wanting to belong, wanting to fit into a society are even more heightened. They're heightened to a point that we are so vulnerable that we become victims of peer pressure most of the time. We really do. It's the sad reality of it, but it happens. So I think this conversation goes very hand in hand with the conversation we were having about adaptability. There's a very fine line between being influenced to do something which is not good for you, but being also influenced to do something which might be good for you. The good part is adaptability. The bad part is peer pressure. This is the one we have to fight off. So peer pressure, I will tell you something, and I know it's easier said than done, but it's fact. If you are getting peer pressured into doing something which will affect your physical health, your mental health, or your spiritual health for that matter, the people who are peer pressuring you to do this are not your friends. Your friends will always respect your boundaries. They will respect your core values and take your sweet time to find these type of friends in your life. If you're getting peer pressured into doing something that you do not want to do, firmly say a no. The power of no is very, very unspoken about. Say no. If you don't want to go out, do a certain activity, say, I don't feel comfortable doing this. If they're your friends, they will still be your friends. So I think that's the bottom line.
I think another thing to mention here is the uh, direct and indirect peer pressure as well. Many a times, students or friends, classmates who are around you most of the time don't really pursue you to associate with the activities they do or the lifestyle they are in. It's a kind of indirect provoking. I feel that, oh, we really enjoyed in this party last week, or we have this fun activities which we do in the evening, which I think you should join. So these kind of things, when one who's especially when a student is introverted, and when one is already fighting their own battle with themselves, find very intimidating or very like a let out or as a best solution to their current problem or the situation. So what do you think about such situations, like students involving themselves, uh, like they are involved by pressure into smoking or drinking or the vape culture which is going on? I do see that the probability of me seeing, like I did do this small experiment. I do associate with myself and very actively into research. So I am into collecting responses and surveys, and I did notice this in one of the weekends that I went around in Poland. I was like, okay, let me see how many people do I come across. Very subconsciously, I'll notice people, how many number of people am I observing who are vaping in outdoors. And I just went for my weekly shopping groceries, and I noticed a certain number. After 2 weeks later, when I realized that, oh, I was doing something of this sort, and again it was the weekend, I was going for the grocery shopping. I was like, okay, let me now see today how many people do I really come across who are either smoking or vaping. And I see that the people who have noticed, let's keep the numbers aside, but of course the numbers were more. 2 weeks later when I went, the numbers were more. But the more important factor is the age group of people who I noticed are in the are on the teen teenage and the young adult age group. So it's not even it's a concerning issue when it's students like people involving 16 to 22-year age, which is the teenage and young adult. So I feel like that is the more bigger of an issue than the issue itself, the nicotine consumption or the addiction. More than that, it's the age at which this entire culture is getting exposed to, and the factor, like the cool factor, and also the fact that one can associate themselves into groups or should try this once, probably because of the people. And many of them have heard this saying that they do this for the people and not for the sake of doing it. So that's one, like these things really like blow my mind when I hear it, that are you lying to yourself or are you lying to me, or what's really happening here? What's the scenario situation like? So what do you have to say about this scenario overall?
I think, again, you touched on something that is very prevalent these days. Vaping is the new cool factor, and I'm going to put it in a positive commas because it's really not cool. I think this
For sure.
ideology is called monkey see, monkey do. So there's this saying that it's sort of like herd mentality. So I don't know if you guys ever played this game. Back in childhood, I used to play this. It's called Simon Says. So one person used to be the leader, and the crowd had to follow everything this person does. In teenagers who are so vulnerable, who are in their peak growing age, hormones are shooting up here and there, they are very prone to falling prey to these sort of trends. I'm going to call it trends because, as you mentioned, it has a lot more to do with not the effects that this vaping, smoking, or drinking is having on their bodies. It has more to do with how it makes them look. Because again, it's that sense of belongingness. They feel like they're part of the society. If my friend is vaping, I also need to vape in order to be acceptable by the society, to be a cool person, or to just sort of be part of the crowd. But that's not true. In fact, I think there is very limited research on vaping, the effects that it has on you. Certain things I've read online even say that vaping is actually more injurious to your health than smoking cigarettes. Now, this doesn't mean that you go off and smoke cigarettes. Please don't get me wrong. Smoking is bad, don't do it. But The chemicals that these vapes have in them, there are jewels and whatnot that are being promoted online on different websites right now. And all these flavors, they sound very fancy. I've heard somewhat along the lines of berry blast and whatnot. And yeah, it sounds very fancy, but it's doing massive harm to your body. And again, all of this is a result of influence, trying to fit in the society, and at the end of the day, completely ignoring the effects that this sort of stuff has on your body. Not just physical health, also mental health. When you get affected physically, you will get affected mentally as well. When you're teenagers, you're in a very, very agile sort of state of mind. It is very easy to influence your decisions. It is very easy to tell you this is right and this is wrong. The sad part is teenagers give more credit to their friends than their family. So their parents might be telling them that, oh, this is wrong for you, they will not listen to them. But if their friends say that this is right, they will do it. So it's very important to spread more awareness. It is important that you inculcate in their, sort of mindset that this is wrong to do. It's not the right way to go about it. They're hampering their health. So vape culture again, I think, is a result of just herd mentality. It started from maybe someone trying to experiment or maybe someone trying to quit smoking and they saw this as an alternative. But that's actually not true. It's actually the opposite. It's a paradox in its own self. It's quite funny.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. I do agree with the last statement which you made, because I think it is a entry, like this has become a very structured format for students to fall prey of. Like it starts with vaping. It starts with something which is like shisha vaping, something which is cool, which is one day, one evening thing, and then gets to a habitual thing, and then gets to smoking, and then gets to weed, like all the things in the world, and they end up in a very uh, like a very disgust place where they are discussed about themselves, they're discussed about the situation, and they're discussed about the decisions that they have made, constant wrong decisions that has led them to this condition and situation, which is a very
Absolutely.
sad place to be in.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, you mentioned something absolutely bang on. So it acts like a gateway drug. I think that's the term you can use for it. So, it sort of builds a bridge and you just need to cross that bridge over. Certain people do, that's the sad reality of it as well. So I think there's a lot of campaigns surrounding rehab after, drug abuse. There's a lot of campaigns for quit smoking. Now, I think there's a need to have campaigns related to quit vaping as well. It's not good for you. There's a lot of limited research on it and you might not even know what sort of an impact it's having on your body.
But I think on that note, I think I remember Apurva mentioning me about one of her recent researches on vaping, and I did get a survey questionnaire from her side on that, so which I had filled. So I just recollected that. Apurva, do you have to say anything, add something to this conversation?
Definitely. I feel like Dr. Muskan definitely touched a very important point there. It's about the contents of vaping. One of the most deterrent effects it is going to have in the near future is on fertility. And the thing is, the age groups that are into vaping right now, it's preteens and young adults. And when they come into the age of trying to conceive, basically, which is 10 years from now, by that time, we may have had disastrous effects and irreversible effects on fertility, which makes it just important why it has to be stopped now. Because even stopping it at that time is not going to make that much of a difference. The damage is going to be done.
So, Dr. Muskan, I think that leads to, is there ever a situation where compromise is okay? How do students find the balance between fitting in and staying true to themselves? We just discussed both the parts, like how can one do the 70-30 balancing of associating themselves, thinking between right and wrong. And now is the question where when is it okay for them to fit in, to compromise to fit in, and but sometimes even fitting in by staying true to themselves. Is there any situation of that? Like, do you think that happens?
Okay. I think compromise is part of any social dynamic. To exist, you have to compromise. The truest example is marriage. Marriage as an institution in itself, you have to compromise to put up with each other. I'm sure my parents do this. They'll kill me when they watch this for saying this, but I'm sure both of them make their own, phases of compromises. There's times when my mom has to listen to my dad. There's times when my dad has to do something that makes my mom happy. So similarly, in a setting of international students, since that's our main theme surrounding the conversation today, it is important to make compromises where it is also benefiting you. But it is not okay to make compromises where you're doing it at the expense of your own health or your own betterment. So, for example, let's say, as I gave the example of joining clubs or joining communities and whatnot, certain people might not want to do that, but your friend is encouraging you to do it because he can see you struggling. That is where you make a compromise. You listen to your friend, you go against your will, and you put yourself in an environment which for sure will give you some sort of a benefit. That compromise is healthy. But on the topic of, let's say, smoking, drinking, vape culture, that compromise is, well, we've already established it's a big no no. There's no compromise on that aspect. So, yes, compromise is important, but you need to find the balance. It's like that yin and yang theory. You need to find the balance where you should be making the compromises. If it's for your loved ones, if it's for the health of your loved ones, do it. But at any point of time, if you feel like, oh, this is not something that is working in my favor, it is not adding any sort of advantage to my career, to my academics, to my mental, spiritual, or physical health, please just say no. The power of no is amazing.
For sure, for sure. And okay, so that's a great advice. And I think there's a lot of stigma around mental health for among international students. There are things like cultural attitude or fear of judgment. Um, and how do you think can that be overcome by a student who is having mental health issue, who's struggling with it alone? How can he express this without the fear of stigma?
All right. Again, this is a very need of the hour question that you've asked me. I think stigma and taboo around mental health has existed for decades. It was a completely unspoken about conversation. We wouldn't be sitting on this podcast having this lovely chat today because there was a shift in the narrative because of our generation that has sort of stirred up these conversations. Now, for international students, there are also several added factors that might be contributing to this stigma and taboo. Part one, I think, definitely is the culture shock that comes with it. Even the language barrier, a lot of things play a role because all these sort of factors add to the feeling of isolation, and these students sort of regress. And because they do not feel like they belong, they can't even converse in the language which is foreign to them. The stigma and taboo keeps feeding into it. Some people see speaking up and reaching out to people as a sign of weakness. In fact, in reality, it's actually the exact opposite. It takes a lot of strength to put your guard down and actually reach out to people. But people see this as a sign of weakness. Again, if someone is crying, they're usually told, well, back in the day, now the narrative is changing. Back in the day, if you see someone crying, you're just like, why are you crying? It's not that big a deal. They brush it off. So we need to stop trivializing people's struggles. If people are opening up to you, if people are reaching out to you, acknowledge their feelings, acknowledge what are they going through. And one important thing I think is the importance of therapy these days. It's very, very important. There are a lot of platforms, even online, that I think international students can sort of benefit from. Maybe I can share the link with you, and if you can just link it down in the description, I think that'd be
Or
quite great. So let's do that. And yeah, these online platforms are actually playing a massive role in helping students out to sort of navigate their own feelings and emotions. And they're very complex to deal with. So I tell my friends, I recently started going to the gym because I'm trying to maintain my physical health even more now. I tell people, you know how gym is incorporated into your daily routine? Therapy should also be seen equally of that importance. Yes, the only sort of disadvantage is that therapy can be financially taxing, but thanks to these online platforms, they're way more affordable now. Some people even provide pro bono support too. So it's important to do your research. It's very important to reach out in professional capacity and make use of these platforms. There are plenty of resources out there. You just need to go up on the internet and look them up. So I think that's very important. Normalize therapy. It is very important. And no, therapy is not just for people suffering. Sometimes you just need a good let out. You just want to talk to someone. That is also the purpose of therapy.
for sure. And that's a really great answer. I think it will really hit home for a lot of people. Normalizing therapy is something which a lot of people needed to hear. I think this can be a hashtag for our discussion down below. And thanks for that. So on that note, I think how can FOMO influence decision making? This is a question which um, even I personally want to know how exactly can one have that control over this feeling of missing out, the fear. More than fear, it's a feeling. I would say it's a feeling of missing out because it's not a fear. You know your life is not going to end in the next 3 4 years, 5 years, but you have that feeling of missing out that today I'm not able to be there. Today I'm not able to enjoy it. Today I'm not part of that happening group. So, what do you think? How does that affect the decision making of one?
Right. So this is something that I still to date struggle with. FOMO. Okay, this is a big word in our household because my friends will invite me for something, and even though I don't know if I want to be in that situation, I'm just like, but what if? What if something out of this world happens? What if Shah Rukh Khan makes an appearance? And that fear of missing out, kicks in. But there's a very well hard hitting truth that I had to realize eventually in life. And that is that sometimes you have to sort of replace FOMO with JOMO. Now, I know I'm sounding a little cringy right now, but let me explain it to you, okay? So I know FOMO is sort of fear of missing out. JOMO just stands for joy of missing out. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is enjoy your solitude. You are your own best company. Sometimes take a breath, take a pause, reflect, and just tell yourself, is this something that I really want to do because I know what the consequences are going to be? Or am I building a world of fantasy and I just want to live in it? Sometimes it might be worth it, but most of the times, I promise you guys, it's not. You have to sort of, draw the line somewhere. So yes, very good topic to sort of dwell into. But yeah, just replace FOMO with JOMO. I think that's my takeaway for this.
That's sweet. That's nice. And Apurva, do you have anything to add to what we just spoke about the entire topic? Like just sort of to give a closure to this with your experiences, like how can one set their boundaries or practice self-care, or about the cultural factors and the influence of peer pressure. This is what we were
Definitely.
talking about.
I feel one of the biggest lessons, one of the biggest takeaways, lessons actually, let's call it lessons, that I learned is the importance of setting boundaries, because if you don't, it will drain you. It's that it's not more of saying no when necessary. It's to make sure that you have that sort of a mutual understanding between your friends. When you, like, first of all, when you come unknown to the country, you're making new friends, and as I mentioned earlier, it's like you try to find a family in these, and when you're trying to do that, you just want to give your all to them, and that is somewhere where people most of the time make their mistakes. When you're trying to give your all, you sort of lose your sense of self, and you end up having to do things, or having to associate with things that you're probably completely against. And that is again where the FOMO thing comes in. It's where your peers, or that can be influenced by even cultural factors. If there's a huge culture shock, obviously, when you move to a new place, and then there are certain things that you have to do in a certain way because everyone else is doing it, and just because you don't want to associate with these things, you're left out, and that fear of being left out makes you want to maybe indulge, or start put yourself into it, and it's a whole cycle. And the best way to stop that is to set boundaries. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a difficult process. It's kind of complicated to understand where and how and when to set boundaries. But the best way to set boundaries is to first discover yourself. If you know who you are, if you know who you truly are, what you believe in, what your beliefs are, then it just makes it easier to set boundaries. And the best way to do this is through self care. Now, that is not just sleeping well, eating well. It's just that joy of missing out, as Dr. Muskan said. It's that solitude that you need, and to with yourself. That could even be like very simple things. Something that I do is I go for walks, just alone, walking. It just helps a lot, and that is where you understand where you will stand. And once you set your boundaries, I'm sure your friends will understand as much that if there is something that you are not comfortable with, if there's something you do not want to associate with, you've already set your boundaries. The best part about this is that it doesn't compromise your friendship.
All right, all right. So with that, I think we can move on to the next segment of ours, where we will be talking about the age difference which we see in medical school, which is very atypical because in most of universities we see a certain age group which spans between 18 to 22 or 18. 19 to 23, of course. But in med school, we see a much more of a age gap or a difference between the first year and the final year students. Sometimes there's a age difference of teenagers versus young adults. That much of a difference. So when it comes to mental health struggles, are teenagers more vulnerable than young adults? Why or why not?
All right, I think there's different ways of looking at this. I wouldn't particularly say that teenagers are more vulnerable. I just think they're more vulnerable to a different set of problems than young adults. So let's take my example. When I was in first year, I was still 18. So I was still in the bracket of being a teenager, right? That's when I was more, let's say, struggling with the fact that, hold up, where is my career going? How am I going to make new friends in this country? So there was a feeling of isolation that I had to deal with. I was more anxious as a person. So anxiety was one of the problems that I was more prone to. For that matter, even feeling shy, even feeling not to open up. So my self esteem was at an all time low. Cut to 6 years later. I was still going through the same problems, but from a completely different facet of life. Now I was on the verge of completing my degree, but I had to plan ahead. So the problems that now existed in my head were, okay, I'm finishing a degree, but will I get a job? How will I manage my finances? Do I want to start a family? If I want to, have I found my partner yet? So again, I don't think you can define someone's mental health struggles as per their age bracket. They're just different things that they're more prone to. So teenagers might be more prone to mental health struggles when it comes in regards to anxiety, peer pressure for that matter, not feeling enough, low feelings of self-esteem. Adults or young adults, on the other hand, might feel more depressed, they might feel from withdrawal, they might struggle with sleep, they might struggle with appetite changes. So that's my take on it. I don't think age can be a criteria, but it depends on the phase of life that you're currently in.
For sure, for sure. And how does age impact one's ability to recognize and seek help for mental health issues? Do you think young adults would act more maturely and appropriately when it comes to seeking help than teenagers?
Yes, this I will agree with. I think younger adults might kind of struggle to even recognize that they're struggling right now because they might not have that sort of a developed, cortex for that matter. We're all medical students here, so I can use these terms. But on the other hand, I think young adults, they're more aware because again, experience defines how you deal with different problems in your life. So a student maybe who's 18 or 19 might be struggling, but he might not know what is actually happening with him. You might see that teenagers tend to be more of rebels, they tend to be more cranky and frustrated, but young adults tend to be more sad and mellow and melancholic. So I think they have more of an awareness 100% because of the age benefit. But yes, young adults do tend to not talk about this enough. So again, I think the need of the hour is that this bracket of age group is also very neglected. So child mental health or children mental health or teenage mental health, these should also be some of the topics that need to be given more importance to, not just young adults. They have access to resources and they might not be able to utilize them to their full benefit. But at the same time, these need to be made more available to these teenagers and these children as well. They need to be taught how to identify the problem, the symptoms that they're presenting with. How do you recognize them? How do you talk about it? And why are they happening? What is the root cause?
Yes, yes. I think that's something for us and the audience and the listeners to look out for and to see whoever, like whether teenagers are sharing rooms with or are their classmates or their friends or whether it's young adults. Look out for such things and please help and support whoever you see around and whatever way possible. Okay. On with that, I think there is a very ongoing trend and topic which is about toxic friendships, which I like to bring about. And what's a unique challenge do each age group face when they are studying abroad, dealing with toxic friendships? Because I'm sure this is something which more or less everyone can relate to and can associate that, okay, there has been a point when I had this encounter with a toxic person or was in a friendship with toxic person. So what exactly is this? So you elaborate and comment on this.
All right. So yes, you mentioned it very correctly. I also have been through this phase. I had a range of different friend circles, and believe it or not, I actually found my true cohort in my last year of medicine school. So I had a different friend circle every 2 years. There was a little inside joke going on that who's going to be the next one. But so yeah, I don't think you can escape toxic friends. You just sort of recognize them along the lines of your experience. So someone might be coming across as a very fun person, someone who shares your values, and someone you love spending time with. But eventually down the line, you realize that maybe these are not the people that are the best to add to your holistic development. So everyone will fall prey to toxic friendships. What I mean by toxic is that these people might sort of manipulate you in a way that suits their own lifestyle at the compromise of your own. And this is the bad compromise. This is not the compromise that you should be doing. So I've also had my fair share of friend circles where I was influenced into stuff that I didn't want to do. It could be going out late in the night and then compromising on my academic commitments for the next day. It could be stuff along the lines of not studying enough because that's not seen as something cool. It could be along the lines of not eating healthy or having a good routine. So it's important that you take your time. Take your time, always assess, are these the people that align with my core values? And I'll be honest, I saw this off Instagram actually, but I really believe in it. Your body sort of tells you when you're comfortable around someone. If you feel like you can be your truest self without hiding any parts of you, you found your friend circle. You will not have to fake having fun. You will not have to fake any sort of likes or dislikes if you're with the people who accept you for who you are. And these are the healthy friendships. At any point of time, if you feel like I'm doing something, I don't like it, but I'm doing something because of the other person, they're probably not meant to be your friend.
For sure, yes. Apurva, do you have anything, any comments, anything to add to this? Do you agree, disagree? Have you had any toxic friendships or toxic people that you have encountered in your life so far?
Definitely. I feel everyone has had. And the thing is, this is where the boundaries are going to come into place again. If you have set boundaries, if you know where you stand, it just makes it easier to stay away from people that you feel are going to harm you in a way.
And with that, I think there's a very interesting segment and some questions which I have prepared, which I'm going to bring about now. So, which is about what are the most common health conditions faced by international students, and like mental health conditions that is being faced by them, but they don't realize it up to a point when they actually snap. When it's the point where the water is above the head, and they realize that okay, I'm sinking, I'm sinking into this. So many a times people have this feeling that okay, these kinds of points or these kind of situations have been faced by me before as well, and I've got out of it. But sometimes it's way too late for calling for help, or sometimes there are signs that we show that this is a cry for help. Um, so, what do you think are the symptoms that a student or a person around us, our friend circle, would show, like the signs and symptoms that we can observe or look for into? Yeah, if you can comment on that. In cases of like say anxiety, depression, panic attack, and as these words come across more frequently, we do hear people know what these words are. They sound familiar, many of them, but don't realize or understand what they exactly are. What happens in such a case. So we can elaborate on that and also answer this.
Absolutely. So, yes, you've used the exact correct terms: anxiety, depression, even, loneliness. These are very commonly thrown around words. But people tend to struggle to see, is this actually depression? Is this actually anxiety? Or are these just layman terms that are being thrown around? So, you always need to sort of look out for some red flag symptoms, is how I like to address it. Some of these symptoms can range from someone being sad for a very long period of time. We call this persistent sadness. If someone has any sort of changes in their sleep cycle, insomnia for that matter, if someone has changes in their appetite, they're not eating well, or on the other hand, they're eating too much out of stress, which is binge eating disorder, you need to be on the lookout for these symptoms. A major symptom of depression is withdrawal from any sort of social situation. Depressed people tend not to indulge in any sort of social activities. They like to isolate themselves. There are days where it is very important for them to even get out of bed. It's very sad and it's very tough to deal with them. So you need to recognize that if you see these sort of signs or symptoms in your friend, family member, or anyone for that matter, please encourage them to seek professional help. It is very important. When we talk about anxiety, something that goes very hand in hand with an anxiety disorder is having panic attacks. People who are not that comfortable with going up on stage for that matter, or even getting accustomed to different social situations, a big group of people, they can suffer from something called a panic attack, which is when you feel like the world is ending. You have a sense of doom coming up, your heart rate goes high, you start sweating, you start feeling dizzy. You have to calm these people down. You have to get them to seek professional help, because these can be very troublesome situations to be in. Another, I'm going to throw around a medical term around here. It's called agoraphobia. So people who have panic disorders tend to develop this. Agoraphobia is basically something where you feel like there's a situation you cannot escape. And I think that's a very scary situation to be in. So these are some of the things that, especially international students, they deal with a lot. Anxiety, depression being top of the spectrum, and also homesickness. Homesickness, I've suffered through it. There's been times when I've been on the phone with my parents or my school friends for hours, just complaining that I want to come back home because I don't feel okay. And I feel sad and I've been crying on the phone. So these are some very common problems that international students deal with. And it's very important that you, as I said, you form a network, you form the kind of people that you can reach out to when you suffer from this. And us as people, if you see these signs and symptoms, please, I urge anyone who's watching this podcast right now as well, recognize these signs and symptoms and get these people good help. They need it. It's a cry for help.
I think this awareness is what we need to bring about, and that's the exact reason why we are here today. We are speaking about this topic is for the awareness, to create the real. There's a need and there's a demand for these kind of help and support by a section of people. So we got to serve them. We got to help them in all the way possible. And with that, I think what I have another question, which is what about most severe conditions like PTSD and stress-induced physical symptoms like tremors or blackouts? How can people around us, our friend circle or our loved ones, help us in this situation? Is it really necessary to be in person, physically present, or is it also okay for someone who is away from them, help them and support them in any way possible?
All right. So PTSD and any sort of, let's say, stress-induced disorders will always need proper professional guidance. As loved ones, you can be there for them, you can talk to them, you can calm them down, but these are proper medical diagnoses. There are certain pharmaceutical medications that are prescribed for these sort of disorders. So definitely, if you seek someone that you think is going through this sort of a disorder, take them to a psychiatrist. Take them to a person practicing psychiatry so they can properly counsel them. Even a neuropsychologist will be tremendously helpful in this case. Take them to these experts so they can guide them how to tackle this. These days, what I've noticed is that PTSD is very freely thrown around as a word. You go down the road, and sometimes if you have a bad memory associated with something, people just casually throw around the word, oh, I have a lot of PTSD from this. It's okay. It's okay to include it in a conversation with your friends, but you need to acknowledge the intensity of this diagnosis. People who suffer from PTSD, which actually stands from post-traumatic stress disorder, are probably military people. That's the first example that comes to my mind. They've witnessed bomb blasts, they've witnessed people getting very severely hurt, and even a slight noise or even the drop of a pen can trigger a very serious reaction from them. That is how PTSD presents itself as. So it's very important that you seek proper professional help. As your loved one, what you can do is be there for them. You don't need to have all the answers to be there for someone. Sometimes your presence is the answer, is how I say it. So be present to your people.
For sure. And Apurva, do you have anything to add and any advice, any kind of relatable situation to add to this?
Definitely. I feel like when it comes to mental health conditions, medical students, unfortunately enough, are the most prone population to experience these conditions because of the constant stress that you're under. And these can come out as actual physical effects and symptoms as well, which will hinder your process of thinking, and etc. And the most common place where you will see this, and hopefully not, but experience it yourself, is right before your OSCEs, right before an exam, right before a viva, a presentation. The stress that comes through at that moment is something you cannot really explain. And most symptoms that I have seen, I have experienced myself, is not being able to breathe, tremors, blacking out, and crying, most students as well. And all of these do require help, but something that you can do at that point when you see someone facing this, or unfortunately enough if you are facing it yourself, is to just breathe, talk through it. Sometimes, most of the time when people are having panic attacks, they know they're supposed to breathe, it's just that they do not know how to, or their body is not able to give them that signal to. And sometimes you just have to breathe with them, and being there, as Dr. Muskan said, is just very important. Another very important thing is mindset. The mindset, willpower, is these are very two powerful things. These influence literally everything you do. And it's obvious how it goes when right before an exam you're thinking, okay, I have 2-3 weeks to cover this much portion, but just right before you see the timetable, you see the amount of portion you have, and immediately that thought process is that, okay, I am not going to be able to pass this, and somehow that will reflect onto your exam. So the best thing you can do is just stay calm, keep a positive mindset, and you will get through things.
All right, then. I think that brings us to the end of this podcast and this episode. And basically, the topic that we wanted to cover today, I think we have given it a good closure. Thank you for your experiences, Apurva. And I think we have covered a lot today, from academic struggles and peer pressure to recognizing mental health symptoms and offering support. And to our viewers and listeners, if you are an international student, remember it's okay to seek help. And if you know someone who is struggling, your empathy and your support can make all the difference. Please do know that. And I think on that note, I would like to give a moment to Dr. Muskan to share her information and source, which can help and actually change a lot of people's life and their current situation, which is the NGO she works for. If you could share about that and also let people know what they can actually seek for from what you've got.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Savitran. I think I've had a beautiful conversation today. I hope a lot of people watch this. I hope a lot of people take some very important lessons from this episode. I would just like to take a minute to tell you guys that I also serve on the board of directors for this NGO called Doctors for a Cause. So Doctors for a Cause is a non-profit student organization. We're pan-India. We have our hotspots in India, Calcutta, Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, and we also have different task forces within our umbrella, one of which is the mental health task force. So at any point of time, if you guys need to seek out for any sort of emotional support, I will be sharing the link with Savitran. I'm sure you can find all these links in the description down below.
For sure, I'll be
Please do.
attaching.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Please do reach out. You can find us on Instagram as well. You can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. At any point of time, if you just want to share a lovely chat, if you just want to talk about anything in life, I think we've established I love talking. So please reach out. Just drop me a message and I'll be there. And once again, Savitran, thank you so much for inviting me on this platform. I think this is truly one of a kind experience that I'll be taking back with me. And I really hope I could be of help. I really hope I could, fulfill the mission of spreading more awareness about my.
For sure. I think thank you, Dr. Muskan, for taking the time out and helping me in this path and journey of creating awareness on something like mental health, which is a rising concern in today's day and age. I think it is the time and effort that you have put in today uh, will actually show an impact. Maybe it's a tiny drop from our side, but it is surely what we have done from our part of being supporting the society and making an impact. So please share this episode with someone you might think could be helpful for them. And thank you for listening. And until next time, take care and remember your mental health matters.
Absolutely.